Namaste, viewers. Welcome to Jaipur Dialogue USA. And as I always request you, please like, subscribe, support our channel. We are extension of Jaipur Dialogue India, and building our narrative here in the United States. We are a young channel and need your support, your feedback that makes us better. We always endeavor to do that. So today I have the great pleasure in welcoming for the second time Daniel Bordman, the
Returning
Canadian
champion.
journalist. I'm sorry?
Returning champion.
Returning champion. That's right. Yeah, yeah. We should take the Jeopardy language for in our show as well. The returning champion, Daniel Bordman, who is remarkably young, very bold, and he also, I will never forget that, he also runs a comedy thing, sting of his own. So we hope to hear some comedy from you. I try to beat Bill Maher, I guess.
Well, let's set those expectations to maximum. So if something to
Yes, yes,
either
yes. Expectations.
razzle dazzle or fail spectacularly. That's
Right. Daniel, I wanted to have this conversation around how the democracies of the world, they seem to be reeling under unbelievable pressure for the values that democracy pride in, and you are seeing that the democratic values are under serious threat. So I read your tweets on Ram Mandir, and thank you very much for your bold and a very strong assertion of India's rights about Ram Mandir. So tell us something about the freedom of religion and how it is playing out in the world scenario when India got chastised by the media, including the Organization of Islamic Countries, that do not give freedom of religion to anybody else other than themselves. So share with the audiences what was your inspiration to stand by Ram Mandir for built by India, Return of the King, as I call it in the Lord of the Rings language. So go ahead, Dario.
yeah. So I was quite emphatically in support of the decision, and we could go over all the Supreme Court. They ruled over it, but listen, most temples, or pretty much every temple in northern India, was destroyed under Mughal invasion. And Raminder, it is important, right? It's believed to be the birthplace of Ram. It was, the seventh incarnation of Vishnu, to my understanding. That's a pretty big deal, again, to my understanding. And the temple was destroyed by Mughal invaders. And the reason they did that, they destroy important temples, and then they used, the bricks of that temple to build a mosque that was in disrepair, that no one really cared about the mosque. Like, the point was to humiliate, like this, I'm going to use like the language from their book. Like, the point is to humiliate the mushrikeen, or the polytheists. And in doing so and humiliating, right, they instituted sort of an anti-Hindu fervor, and tens of millions to hundreds of millions of Hindus were slaughtered by hand under this rule, right? It is mass genocide. So I see, like, my win for humanity is basically, in order to stymie hatred, you actually have to counter the, like, evil ideologies that perpetrate it. You can't just sit down in a circle and clap kumbaya, right? And you have to understand how to confront each evil. Like, there's a way to confront fascist Germany or Italy, right? There's a different way to confront, communism. And then there's a way you have to confront radical Islamic behavior. And the rebuilding of the temple is a great way to counter radical Islamism. And it doesn't mean all Muslims, right? There was 5 acres given to build a mosque. So there's not like the decision was, what you need to do is destroy every mosque in the city. No, that's not what you need to do. But you need to firmly assert your religious rights and confidently do it, because if you show that you're confident, or you don't build it, or you show that you're afraid of potential Islamic blowback, you get more Islamic blowback. And that's something that a lot of people have either a hard time understanding. My actual impulse is they just don't want to understand that, because if you start with understandings like that, it might change other parts of your worldview. So to maintain the illusion, or that you can live in fantasy land, we sometimes adopt certain ways of magical thinking. The sort of coexistence with radicals through campfire songs is one of those. So that was the first thing. It's like, the temple should have been there. It's a good win for humanity because it actually sets some sort of deterrence and pushback and makes Hindus and all Indians safer in the long term. And the other thing is, listen, this is a cultural win. This is a revival of an ancient temple that actually means something, right? There'll be economic prosperity in the city. As I already know people who are going to plan to visit it, right? If I go to India, I'd love to visit. It helps build out the culture that you need. And listen, we all want to believe that we can live in these totally super secular societies. Like, I'm a secular person, and I like that. I like religious freedom. I like countries that have, freedom for all, and you can practice whatever religion. But countries need to be more than just empty secularism, and you need some form of cultural and national identity that unifies people inside those borders under the banner that is Canada, America, Brazil, India, Argentina, whatever it is. And if you don't have anything that unifies you together outside of politics, right? Which, am I on the red team or the blue team? You get internal chaos. So this push to prop up the dharmic values of India, I see as a good thing, and in fact necessary for the long-term survival of India as a functioning, cohesive state. So this is my sort of, this is why I deem it a win for humanity, because listen, the reason this temple was destroyed was to humiliate the Mushrikin, and it led to a genocide. And when the Mushrikin, or the polytheists, are not humiliated but proud and open about it and can stand firmly, and I don't mean run around attacking people, I mean just stand your ground firmly and proudly, you deter more radical Islamism. And that's a good thing for everyone involved, Muslims too, right? So this is why, the Temple Iota is such a win, I see. And just a general, it's a general all-around good thing. And now, of course, the media is in histrionics because it was built on the site of a mosque that hadn't been used in decades, before it was, destroyed in 1992, right? Do we have to say it was good that it was taken down in 1992? No, we don't have to. But, all things equal, if we're going to, look at history, like, okay, it was a temple, then there's a mosque, now it's a temple again. And anyone who's mad about this, the Hagia Sophia, like one of the most important churches in all of Christianity, is now being converted into a mosque. And you have Erdogan like holding swords in the mosque, promising like global caliphate, more. So again, with the OIC, I don't believe any of the critics of Ramajender actually believe what they're saying. I don't believe they believe in general religious freedom or democracy or whatever reason they are giving to push this. I don't believe it. I don't. I've seen a lot of the left just take up the cry of, we're going to talk about like democracy when, we're not even talking about democracy. Absurd things. The most absurd example is the Israeli left before October 7th was all in this judicial reform thing. And there's this big push to save democracy. And I had my left-wing Jewish family. Yeah, we must save democracy from Netanyahu. And I said, guys, you're anti-democracy here. Like, what this is the Supreme Court of Israel has the power to overrule any law based on reasonability. If they find something unreasonable, they can invalidate the law. So Netanyahu ran on saying, no, the Supreme Court can't just invalidate any law passed by the Knesset by deeming random unreasonability. They need better reasoning, right? This is the whole thing. And this was built as he's trying to end democracy. And we did this. It's like, actually, no, he's trying to empower the democracy because what the people vote for. Now, I'm not a pure I'm not a pure democracy guy. I don't think everyone can just vote on everything all the time. Are we going to build a road? Let's vote. Are we not going to build a road? Who funds it? Vote. I believe in voting. I believe in a democratic state, but I'm a constitutional monarchist or a constitutional Republican, depending on the country you look at. So what the actual people on the Israeli left, they were anti-democracy. They wanted a more constitutional republic. And that's fine. That's my point of view, generally on the world. But they couldn't even explain what they were talking about because they didn't understand what they were talking about. They just kept screaming democracy, 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 because that's something that the American left likes to hear. Donald Trump's anti-democracy. A vote for Joe Biden is a vote for democracy. It's like, guys, no. A vote for Joe Biden is a vote for the Democrats. A vote for Donald Trump is a vote for the Republicans. Let's cut the histrionics. The attacks on democracy is, places like, Venezuela, where they've ended the democracy, and they have fake elections. And Joe Biden, in his defense of democracy, has completely allowed Venezuela to turn into they lifted the sanctions. They're allowing the Iranians to run oil through Venezuela, so now the Iranians are at max oil capacity, and they have enough money to fund the Houthis, Hezbollah, Hamas, and that's instigated a giant global crisis because we didn't defend democracy. But these were the great rights. So defending democracy has just become this phrase for sort of, center left technocrats on TV to just describe things they don't like. And I think that's corrosive because, there's people who will always intuit like there's something wrong with this because they're saying this is an attack on democracy, but what they're actually doing is attacking me. Do I hate democracy? And like it spirals that way because it's a very disingenuous defense of democracy that we're seeing all around the world. And, I am generally happy when I see countries, push back on this, and you're having like strong leaders that just don't give in to this pressure from the media. Like, you have Milei in Argentina now, you have Modi in India. Like, this is what we're going to need going forward is actual people who can defend democratic values while being screamed at that they're destroying democracy. Because it looks like that's what's going to be screamed at us for the next few years until there's something new. But, basically you're against democracy means you vote for a party right of center.
Thank you. I definitely appreciate your opening, which was very powerful. The issue here is very interesting. You talked about, for example, you use the word de-radicalization. And I think de-radicalization will be the process going forward, in my opinion, because what is happening, thanks to science and technology, we know a lot more than we knew before. This is very important. You wouldn't have probably heard about Ram Mandir and what is happening in India until if these tools were not available to us.
Yeah,
Now,
without social media, without high-speed internet access.
yeah,
No.
now I say that the news travels faster than the speed of lightning, euphemistically speaking. And I don't need to read New York Times or any newspaper to gather news. Opinions is another matter. I don't need to read the newspapers to gather news anymore.
Yeah.
So one of the interesting news the event that happened in India was that the India Supreme Court ruled that public funds cannot be used for religious teachings and religious educations in madrasas and other places. They use that. They ruled it just yesterday. So that's a pretty important news. The people are talking about how will it be implemented. That's another matter. But coming back to the media part, in democracy, media plays a big role in dissemination of knowledge and information. And when you see the tirade by New York Times to Guardian to Time Magazine to CNN, I have the whole list of it here. I don't want to read that. You have seen it probably by yourself.
I can add some Canadian ones: CBC, CTV.
There is CBC and everybody.
Yeah.
They're all putting through one common narrative, which you alluded to, you mentioned earlier on, that a mosque was raised and a Hindu thing has come about. Do they not get the information correctly, or they want to push an agenda? That's where the viciousness, which is where the fourth pillar of democracy, so to say, is failing itself. Now, the mood in India is to hell with these international news. Who gives a damn? Who is losing here? What is at stake here? And you are a journalist, so I'm asking you, and I'm in journalism as a television journalism, I'm seeing that. Where is the truth?
Yeah, so this is the way I think of it. Is I've always thought of like this question. Inside any organization, right? We have a lot of these organizations. How many radicals does it take to push an organization into a position, right? Like, what is the ratio of radicals to cowards that you need, right? So if you have a news organization, New York Times, insert whatever you want to talk about, and let's say there's like 100 people, within that ecosystem, let's say, does it take one radical, someone, affiliated with the Muslim Brotherhood, and or just to push these narratives and be very strident about it and everyone else will just fall into line? Does it take 2, 3? Like, I know it's clearly less than 10%, right? And the rest of the newsroom, there's not a lot of courage left to. No one at the New York Times is left who will say, "Wait a minute, isn't this person affiliated with like Hezbollah somehow?" Like, that's gone. So every single news organization has, diversity, equity, inclusion, or DEI, right? So you can be reasonably certain that there's a few people, and we've seen them write articles inside these news organizations that have like outright Islamist affiliations. There's the popular set of villains in India, with the Pakistani-backed people. Then you have like Sarah Rio, who are just like insane leftists, and you have enough, at least 4 or 5 people, I think, in every newsroom who will just viciously and unethically attack India because they're ideologues, right? So who needs the truth? They'll push a narrative and they'll get it out there. And then, it is India. So, how many people in that newsroom are there to counter that? There's clearly more insane radicals than there are people with a full, well-rounded understanding of India or anything else, really, right? So you then have news organizations where you have these push from the inside and they're getting this narrative out. And also, a lot of modern journalists are lazy, right? So you see a narrative put out there, right? Oh, these are the facts, done, right? You just have those facts, you put them out there, and then someone with the newsroom, right? Those radicals are going to be like, yes, that is the narrative we want, right? And even if you kind of understand that, like, wait a minute, wasn't this a Hindu temple first destroyed by Islamic invaders? That putting that fact out there, those 4 to 5 people in that newsroom will come for you. So everyone writing an article is making a calculus of, okay, either I'm just lazy and they're not really thinking, oh, it's true, it was put on the mosque in 1992. Okay, out. That's the safe thing. It's for dum-dums and cowards, right? So the dum-dums, they're lazy and they're stupid. That's why they did it. The cowards, it's, do they want to avoid hurt? And then there's also 2 layers to this because it has to get by an editorial board too. So it's not just, me as an independent journalist who, I co-found the National Telegraph. There's like, when I put opinions out there and I give them to be edited by my coworkers, they edit for grammar and flow, right? And then if they think something is wrong, they'll, we'll call and talk about it. But if, I have an opinion or facts are out there, like, I can get what I want to say out there. I don't really have to go through a, editorial board. Like, and when I edit other people's articles, I don't really edit their ideas or their positions unless I'm like, oh, no, you made a factual mistake here. It wasn't 1937. That was 1947. Like, right. That would be the only thing I do. So the systems themselves have been infiltrated by some radicals. And we've seen that just a few of them being hyper vigilant, and they have the tools to bully, like the diversity, equity, inclusion, right? They can, listen, if you say this was actually a Hindu temple first that was destroyed by the Mughal Empire and then they committed a mass genocide, someone's going to call you an Islamophobe, right? And just the accusation inside these newsrooms could destroy your career. So are you going to risk your career for India, right? You were born in Ohio. You're just some random, half white, half Mexican guy from Ohio. So you're kind of a minority, you're half Hispanic, but you're you're walking on thin ice there. Where do you kind of fit, right? You want to break the mold, it's not going to go well for you at the New York Times. Like, you're going to have to fight a pitched battle just to put out these few facts. So most people, of course, go, okay, it's not worth it. And even maybe if someone did worth it, it was pulled out by the editors, who I'm sure there's either some people on that side too. So, these we've seen it. These institutions have been corrupted. The media, academia, full on taken over by radicals. Like, we have Harvard University, Columbia University, it was Penn State, MIT, or is killing the Jews bad? We don't know. Depends on the context, the Jewish genocide, right? And I go, and listen, I think we both understand, anyone who thinks, attacking Jews is good, they also believe attacking Hindus is good, and vice versa. So is it any surprise that these organizations are acting the way they are? Like we've seen what they say under oath. Like they're they're corrupted. They're ideologically corrupted through and through. And you're just and it manifests into anti-Israel, anti-India, anti-Canada, anti-America, anti-Western, like and the pillars of democracy are, Venezuela and Iran. Like
You use a word newsroom, and that took me back to the wonderful Jeff Daniels series Newsroom itself.
ah yes,
If
I
you
remember
haven't, if you
I remember
haven't
that.
watched it, if you haven't watched it, please do, because I did. And I loved the entire concept that they talked about, that how the corporate greed and political partisanship,
Mhm.
forget about the individual relationships, that allows people to do what you said. And you are very pointed about that. A guy sitting in Ohio, from Ohio, why the hell would he risk his career for a news report which you put out the convenient story? You save your skin, your job, your money, and everything else. You end up being an indentured servant, but that's a different matter altogether. I have a life to lead.
Yeah.
However, what is important is, where do we go from here then? Because everybody is manipulating everybody else. So, as you
Yeah.
rightly said, the radicals, the people who have infiltrated the system, they recognize the system, they claim victimhood, they play the blame game, and then you and I say, what the hell? So, where do we go from here then?
I mean, my philosophy back in 2015 when I started this is like, I think I can do the news better than the CBC, our national broadcaster. So I'm
Right.
going to do it, right? And instead of just sitting there complaining about, oh, this and this and that, and they're bad and they're this, you know, put out an alternative source of media, like do something I think is better, get people off of it. And I do think, this is why, especially in Canada, they're going so hard against alternative media because we're winning. And the old legacy media can't compete online. They don't know how. They're too antiquated. They're too bloated. They can't make money online. We can, they can't, and people are all online. I can go over the philosophies of why I think they're failing, and that's a whole other conversation in itself. But they have this sort of institutional prestige still, where it's like, oh, it's in the Washington Post, it's in the New York Times. To a lot of people, right? No one reads it, right? So, for example, like if I were to put out an article just like by myself and do it, Daniel style on, you know, Canadian blah blah blah, Trudeau bad, emergency act, something something. I do it through my own social media, through my own networks, through what I more people will read it than if I got an article in the Globe and Mail. But if I get an article in the Globe and Mail, my family, like, they'll read it then. But my family will be, oh wow, look how proud look, it's in the Globe and Mail, the Washington Post. It's real, right? No one's reading it, but it's like a stamp that, oh okay, now it's real news to a lot of people. And I think that's what we kind of have to defeat, and that's one that's an older mentality. So as newer, there is a problem with Gen Z and their sort of TikTok craze. Like, they're learning about Osama bin Laden on TikTok, and that's a disaster. So I'm not saying I have faith in the young people growing up, and like, these brilliant young people are going to replace these old farts who don't know how to work a computer, and we're going to live in a no. They're shaking their ass and reading Osama bin Laden's propaganda stuff to, like, they're not brilliant either. The but one good thing I will say about the dum dums on TikTok who can't read or write is they don't respect the general institutions, right? The TikTok generation who gets their news in 30-second snippets, they don't care about the New York Times, they don't care about the Washington Post. And I do believe in, right, as these institutions lose prestige, they lose power, right? Because their power is purely linked to their prestige. And no one has lost more prestige, I think, in the last few months than Harvard University, right? Harvard is known as like the number one. Maybe someone's like, no, Oxford is number one, but Harvard has this like gold seal prestige, platinum, like, oh, I went to Harvard Law, I went to Harvard this, ooh, Harvard, right? It has that name. Well, For the last 10 years, there's the best way to lose respect for a university is to go university. And my experience at Queen's University showed me that 50% of the students that went to Queen's got dumber by going there. And the Queen's is like a good school in Canada. It's like one of our, top 4 schools. And I learned to talk to people. The better the school, the dumber the kids get. And I can go over why, but you see it where they're just taught empty ideologies. And when people see this, right, when someone looks at the employee industry and goes, "Oh, Harvard," they might be crazy, instead of "Ooh, Harvard," then you have a massive shift. And I think we're getting there. We're on the thing, but eventually, I do think there will be some sort of critical mass on the institutional prestige, and then we'll have, I think, a grand opportunity to really build something better. And listen, I don't say, I'm not promising you it's all going to be glory and victory. Like, I'm just saying it's going to be an opportunity, because again, some of the people coming on to this are the TikTok generation, who again are, just openly consuming Osama bin Laden propaganda and, whatever it is the CCP wants to push on TikTok. And, you know, um, you've seen the polling on what they think about, terrorism, the youth here. So it is, I think we had that first sort of rise of alternative media around 2015, 2016 when I got into this. And I do think there will be a second wave where we see a sort of leveling of the playing field, where, we all just become media. And, the general, a lot of magazines and newspapers, like, they probably stop printing less because it costs so much, and they'll call it eco-friendly or something, and they're saving the planet as they move online and sort of reduce circulation flow. So it's like, yeah, so the National Telegraph doesn't put out a physical newspaper, but neither does the New York Times. So what are we talking about here? I see that coming sometime in my lifetime. I'm not going to put a date on it, but for people who want to like fight back, the best way to fight back is to actually do something, right? And like, listen, you don't have to start your own news company, but you don't have to consume the New York Times. You don't have to don't, right? If you're frustrated with the New York Times and Washington Post, don't give them your prestige, right? If someone says they work the New York Times, you don't have to respect that, and find news outlets that you do like, follow me, like and subscribe, right? There's a lot of things you can do. And there's a lot of alternative media out there. Like, you don't have to just follow me. Find people you like, find people you think do a good job, read multiple news sources. It's all out there now. Like, you can find better ways to consume, and like, that's your way of fighting back, is just sort of cutting the cord and realizing these institutions are corrupt and they hate you. Find something better. Don't give them your eyeball. Reduce their viewership by 1, maybe tell your wife 2, and then give those eyeballs, give that attention to someone who deserves it, in your opinion. And that's, a small step you can take. And the more people who do that, the better off we'll be.
That's quite brilliant. Yes, that's exactly what you and I are doing. And that's what we have created the alternate media, and then we do have a following, and people do listen to us. And at Jaipur Dialogue India, we have 1.3 million subscribers now, and in the US, in as few many months that I have been here, we are reaching to 32,000 subscriptions and regular viewers. That's It
Great.
also throws up a particular challenge, and that challenge is that using the same tools, you will have radicals coming up with their own channels to do the radicalization. How will this entire scenario play out, where everybody is using a drone now to attack one another? You are looking at the technology, AI coming in, and I remember during when I was 8 or 9 years of age, I was used to read Magnus the Robo Fighter, the comic book. That was AI gone wrong.
Yeah.
So the question is, will we ever have what I used to call, I call elevated equilibrium because of technology? Or are we going to sink low? We're using these tools to undermine anybody, everybody, all the time.
I think you get a little bit of column A, a little bit of column B. Is my instinct, right? The problem with AI, or the biggest problem with AI, is who writes the AI, right? We've seen the political biases of ChatGPT. So if we write an AI to just be a New York Times leftist. That's artificial intelligence in the news, right? And that's a problem, right? But then will someone on the other side say, okay, no, I'm going to write a better AI. I'm going to write the Ben Shapiro AI, and then it's we have dueling AIs there. So I do see there, the sort of equilibrium. What was your
I
phrase?
use the word elevated equilibrium.
So I do see an elevated equilibrium. I see this as a good thing. I do see this coming, right? So I do believe that us and alternative media, those of us who've been forced to fight sort of a guerrilla warfare style, right? Who don't have the air force and the fancy artillery, that is the printing press and the establishment and these massive newsrooms and hundreds of millions of dollars, right? We've just kind of been over here with our computers and our microphones and are editing things like our small teams, right? Technology being equal, I think greatly benefits us because I think we
Yeah.
are better equipped. We understand, this better. We're sort of more hardened. We've actually had to like be boots on the ground. We've actually had to, struggle through things. Like if you do news in Canada, alternative media, like you have to really want to do it because the system is trying to stop you actively, right? So we have years of experience of overcoming every obstacle that the entire establishment can throw at us. No one at the New York, Toronto Star, CBC, like any establishment thing, left or right, no one has that experience. They've all been cushy little newsroom jobs to just vomit out the same things that everyone's been vomiting out on repeat. There's these, high, they have high profile columnists and public figures who will come in and drop an article here and there. But for the majority of it, it's all very, vanilla and safe. And when you democratize it and when people get to choose what they want, people will often choose what they deem to be excellent. Now, that could be crazy. That could be nonsense communist propaganda that just tells them everything they want to hear. Fine. But all things being equal, I do think, people like us who've survived the alternative media landscape, who've had to deal with being the underdog in a narrative battle, will have, you know, so weapons of war are very important. But also the soldier's ability to use said weapon and experience matter a lot, right? So if you, equalize the technology, then it comes down to the people wielding it. And I think that is where, people like us who've had to sort of scrap out our living on the frontiers, um, I think that's where we'll have an advantage going forward.
Yes, technology is one of the biggest enablers. I wanted to, and I we have to use that. Where you very very rightly said, two things about AI: garbage in, garbage out, the classic adage of computer,
Mhm.
and the second one is the man behind the machine, as the saying goes.
Yes.
So both the things you talked about. The other issue which I is in my mind is that you are Jewish, I am Hindu.
Mhm.
Why are we so hated by others? That is something that bothers me because I'll give you a backdrop to that. It's very interesting, and that if you there's a senator once told me, and I've shared this with my audiences many times, and I will never get tired of saying this. We love you Indians as immigrants to this country because you are professionals, you work hard, you are in the highest median income, you have family values, you take care of your children, you are not a law and order problem in any country as an immigrant, and you ask for nothing. Now, we are, I mean, I said you as a
Mhm.
Jew and me as a Hindu, we love to live our life within ourselves. Why are we such vicious targets of the vested interests that are there?
Yeah, I mean, it breaks in a lot of things. So everyone who hates Jews seems to hate Hindus, and vice versa. There might be slight differences in the manner it manifests. Um, so the hard right ultra nationalists, you can understand, right? They hate everyone, right? The Nazis, the Aryan race, the German people kill everyone else. Okay, there's some people who are like in group, out group. Why are you hated? Because you're in the out group. You're not in the in group. Okay, but then you get to other types of hatred. The Quran, the radical Islamists. Muhammad chopped the heads off of hundreds of Jews. And listen, the Quran outright says, violence towards polytheists, like openly preaches non-coexistence with Hindus, and justifies, let's be honest, rape and mass murder of Hindus. Um, killing the men, take the women as sex slaves unless they convert. This is a religious teaching to some people. So you have that. And then you have sort of the stranger thing, right? The people who are supposed to defend us, right? The left, the institutions, the good people, the civilized, the educated. Why are they against us? Right? This is the thing that drives a lot of people crazy, right? The alt-right radical racists, we all get that, right? To an extent, anyone who's willing to speak uncomfortable truths can say, okay, we get why the radical Islamists hate Jews and Hindus, because it says, and they're screaming it all the time, and okay, it's kind of black and white there, right? If you have the intellectual courage to go there, you get it. But these technocrats, why? And I've said, I think you outlined it, like, oh, Hindus, they integrate, they don't do this. There is a problem with you guys being hated by the first two groups for the third group. A key promise of the modern left, or especially the more intersectional left, is, hey, especially to like the black community, right? Because most of the world is seen through an American white versus black lens. Let's just be honest. That's what the world is now. It's Jim Crow, right? So, hey, black community in America, you're not doing that well. You're poor. And the reason you are poor is because of racism. Racism has made you poor. Vote for us because we're against racism. We will reduce the racism and thus reduce the poverty. However, that's not how it works. And this is where the Jews and now the Hindus provide a big problem, right? This is more centered to Jewish, Jews are perceived to have a lot of money, right? And we do better in, average net thing. We're not number one, but, do better than average. Hindus, same thing, right? Do better than average. But here's the problem. Both Jews and Hindus experience higher level of hate crimes than other communities. But they're both financially successful. So they destroy the narrative that hate crimes equal poverty. That's not true. That's not what causes poverty, right? It's education, families together, right? Mother and father in the house get educated, push that on a cultural scale, you get reduced poverty. That's the number one thing. But in order to maintain this narrative, political narrative, you have to then blame. So I think it manifests. This is where it's different, though, for me and Jews and Hindus. For Jews, you then have to blame them, right? So it's like, the reason why they're doing poorly, even though all these hate crimes, is actually they're part of some global nefarious conspiracy of the Zionists and the oppressor-oppressed matrix. And the reason why Jews are financially successful is because they're Zionists and therefore oppressing Palestinians. So they're oppressing someone else and they're stealing wealth there in order to make themselves powerful here. So they're actually yes, people are doing hate crimes against them, but they're doing more evil. That's how they get money, right? And we institute 13th century Jewish tropes. And so my difference between Jews and Hindus is the same people hate us, except when people bring up Jews, everyone goes crazy and loses their mind, right? People just go from 0 to 11 like that. When Hindus are brought up, everyone goes down to 0, right? Everyone just wants to ignore, right? There's billions of Hindus, and we all just kind of want to ignore this, right? That's how I see racism towards Jews and Hindus. That's where it slightly manifests differently, because I can show people pamphlets of Khalistani temples where no, here, kill Hindus, kill. This guy did some killing. We like him because he killed. More killing, like Brampton. I can show you this. And when it comes to Hindus, everyone just wants to, and then scurry on with their day. Except when it comes to Jews, everyone wants to go ballistic and lose their mind. So that's, and I see that's the two sides of it. So Hindus have this same thing as Jews, where you break the narrative that wants to be said. So the solution there seems to be just pretend they don't exist. Just, I don't know, throw them to the wolves and let's look over there. Whereas when the Jews do it, it's everyone lose our mind and invent crazy conspiracy theories to justify all of this. Um, that's that's where I see a lot of the modern you could say anti-Hindu bigotry and anti-Semitism manifesting from the establishment is because you're you're doing bad. You're breaking the narrative. You have the audacity to be successful while being hated, and that can't be tolerated because that's our key, social electoral push is that racism equals poverty. And you guys are being jerks, experiencing racism and not being poor. So you must be honest.
Look, I hear you, and I recognize the element that how the narrative is about the white and the black, and that shapes the oppressor oppressed scenario in the
Yeah.
rest of the world. It's fascinating. There is a particular thing happening in America which never happened before. We just had two primary elections. One was the caucuses in Iowa,
Mm.
and we had the New Hampshire primary, where Trump established a record of winning both. Uh, New Hampshire for the third time, which is a very liberal state, very educated state, lot more independence. Yet he beat Nikki Haley, the darling of the crowd, where a lot of Democrats voted for her by double-digit margins. But interesting part is the immigration was in New Hampshire, the northern state here, northeastern state here, and Iowa, the Midwest arena. They both had immigration as the topmost problem. Over 40% people voted, opined that immigration is a major problem because now everybody is saying that we have become the border state
Yeah.
because Texas cannot adopt. And now in Chicago, the black people are accusing the Democrats and they are going to sue the mayor for following the pro immigration policy, which leads to denial opportunities to them. How do you see this playing out in the election year, particularly? Now you have a scenario. Texas governor began to send people to sanctuary states and sanctuary cities, and those governors and mayors who used to sing songs about being a sanctuary state come here, now they're crying. And
Yeah.
when
Like,
Texas governor put the barbed wire, the Supreme Court ruled 5-4 with the two Republican nominees, the Chief Justice and the other lady, said that
Dakota Bear.
it's
Yeah.
they can do that. But the Texas governor saying that no, it's your job to protect my border, and if you don't do it, I'm going to do it. It's a major showdown coming up, and 14 states have joined. How do you think the the black and white, the immigrant scenario is going to impact the election in 2024 in America?
I think this is the best issue for Trump because this is sort of Trump's a very build a wall type of guy, and you can did he get the wall built in 4 years? It's a beautiful wall, a giant wall, the most magnificent wall you ever seen. No, but no one reasonable really expected an entire wall. But Trump did reduce immigration by just saying we're not going to enable it. You like the way you reduce immigration is kind of like rhetorically, like you could just say no, and then actually when people illegally immigrant, deport them. Oh, it's hard to get into the States and I'm just going to get there and get deported. Okay, it's not worth it. I'm not going to come. Right? Actually, deterrence, right? You have to deter bad behavior. And listen, you're right. Like, I think, listen, you can say, oh, it's human trafficking to send migrants to this. It's like, listen, they're not American citizens. You come there illegally. It's not torture to be put on a bus and sent to New York. That's not torture. Like, that's not real human trafficking. We have real human trafficking. So I loved it, right? When Texas and Florida said, oh, your sanctuary cities, here you go. Be a sanctuary. Martha's Vineyard, here's a couple hundred. Like, remember, Martha's Vineyard got some migrants and they all lost their minds. And it showed just how hypocritical they are. And like, you can poo poo in Texas, Arizona, they're stupid. Well, they've been able to handle this migration crisis, but it's getting out of hand. And the second you're put in Texas's shoes at just 2% of what Texas has to deal with, New York collapses. Right? And this mentality where if something doesn't affect us, we can pretend it's not real and the people affected by it are crazy. Well, okay, and now the southern states called your bluff and said, okay, well, now it's real for you too. What are you going to do? And listen, if immigration's a top, anyone who prioritizes immigration, unless they're a radical leftist open borders like I think immigration is the most important thing because we need to destroy the country. Okay, fine, they'll vote. They might not even vote for Joe Biden. They might vote for like some wacko socialist party. But anyone who's like, no, immigration needs to be curbed, and we can't have illegal migrants just flooding through the country at will, like taking up, like it's not going to work. They're more likely to vote Trump. And if the Democrats don't get a hold of the situation, I see it as a major Trump win. And I don't think they're capable of getting a hold of it because they don't seem to be capable of admitting they were wrong about anything. Like, where they had to, Trump designated the Houthis as a foreign terrorist organization. What are the first things Biden did? Remove the Houthis from the foreign terrorist organization list. And then the Houthis started attacking America. Oh, now they have to put them back on. They didn't designate them as strongly. They didn't go back to foreign terrorist organizations. It's like a specially designated. It's like a couple levels below what Trump had them at. See, they can't even admit they were wrong. They have to be a little bit spiteful to Trump over American national interests, right? So when you have this mentality of, listen, you can call Trump childish and immature, and, when Trump attacks, Barack Obama or, some insane leftist mayor or the New York Times, you're like, yes. And then when a veteran who runs a shelter for amputee cats and dogs says he doesn't like Trump, and now he's attacking this guy, you're like, well, no, let's not do that. So you have the sort of problem with Trump, but the exact same maturity problem exists within the Democratic Party, where everything Trump says is bad. Everything. Even when he takes 10 different positions on an issue, like it's all evil, right? And I remember in 2019 when during Bloody November, when the Islamic regime in Iran was massacred at least 3,000 people, they put out a statement saying, yeah, I know we're shooting them in the heads. They were asked why they're shooting the heads, but they said, don't worry, we're also shooting them in the legs, as if that made it better. And Trump stood with the people of Iran fighting for freedom. And because Trump said standing with the people of Iran is good, Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi, what do? No, shooting people in the head is good. They sided with the regime. They couldn't even say, you know what? People asking for basic freedoms, don't shoot them in the head. They couldn't even do that because Trump said shooting them in the head is bad, therefore shooting them in the head is good. It's childish, right? And you have the adults are in charge again. No, they're not. These people are children. Have you seen Jake Sullivan's views on the world? Have you seen what Anthony Blinken thinks of the world? Joe Biden? Have any of these people ever been right about anything in their entire careers? No, they've been catastrophically and categorically wrong about everything they've ever said or done about foreign policy. And it's blatantly obvious to anyone who knows a lick about the world. Yet they managed to double down and continue this magical thinking that drives the Democratic Party right now. So issues like immigration are going to determine it. And listen, the 2024 is going to be an absolute cluster F bomb because we're going to get Trump Biden 2.0, and he's going to say crazy things, and he's going to drive the Democrats crazy, and they're going to say crazy things, and we're all going to be, fighting this information war. But it's going to be fun, and I'm kind of glad we get it again because, listen, as someone who runs an online alternative media news outlet, Trump's good for business, baby. Okay, Trump is entertaining. Okay, it's fun when he says crazy things, and you're like, what did he say on Twitter today? Is he yelling at the North Korean dictator? Is he friends with the North Korean? Like, what's going on? It's like fun, and then the meltdowns from the media are more fun because they just go insane, and you're like, oh, look at these lunatics, like they're having a mental breakdown. Like, oh, here's someone I hate who is usually a reasonable person, but now they're a lunatic. They're a raving lunatic, and I enjoy it. And I can make fun of them now. So it looks like we're going back to that world. We're going to get at least a few more months of Trump in the news, saying crazy things, being hilarious, sometimes saying the wrong thing, then saying the right thing, then saying a medium thing, then going back to the right thing, then to the wrong thing, back to the right thing. And we know, you know what? We've been here before. We've done this rodeo before. And, I'm down for it. Like, this is a sequel I'm down for. Usually I don't like sequels, get something new, but of the two sequels I'm looking forward to this year, it's the second Dune movie and the second Trump Biden movie.
Yeah, that would be fascinating to watch. And from the media part of it, we have a lot to do and a lot to cover. And that is definitely an opportunity. However, There's one thing which I find is very disconcerting, and that is, that criminals and thugs are taking advantage of the opportunity that our system provides.
Yep.
That's the sad part. You were earlier talking about that a radical in New York Times or Washington Post takes a position, and rest of the people are saying, "Okay, let it go." But
Yeah.
what is also happening is that they are capturing the radicals in India or other places
Hmm.
who become their spokesperson. So Washington Post has several in India who begin to become the voice of that, the local voice, and that gains credibility. We have a lot to fight on. But one thing which I wanted to talk to you about, not to mention about Canada when a Canadian is on the show today, would be virtually criminal. So your prime minister, which he has been referred also to as Justin Castro, I had a good laugh at that. But he was virtually chastised by one of your federal courts that he had misused and abused the authority when he crushed the truckers' strike using emergency powers.
Yeah.
What happened
Um,
there?
all right. So, as one of the journalists on the ground covering the convoy, so he invoked the Emergencies Act, which is Canada's version of martial law, to crush trucker protests. And as someone who was covering no roads were blocked. The blockades of whatever bridges that were unrelated to it or kind of related to it had already been cleared. But he still invoked emergency powers to, smash windows, brutalize truckers, and you were covering it. Like people were just being grabbed, ran by the police, beaten. I know people, and they were like driven an hour outside of Ottawa by the cops and just like let out of the car. Like they just beat them, take them, drive them a couple hours to the city, push them out the car, and let them go. Like full on Banana Republic stuff. And finally, the federal courts ruled, and I will give the CCLA, which is generally a pretty left wing legal organization, it's a major one, but they came to their senses here and they said, no, 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 even though I disagree with this, civilian Canadian citizens should have human rights. So good on them. And they took the federal court to challenge the validity of the Emergencies Act. And remember, the government had run its own inquiry into the Emergencies Act where Justin Trudeau appoints a family friend and he looks at all the things and people come and testify. And then he writes that Justin Trudeau is a very nice boy and, whoopsie doos. But this federal court proceeding was one where the Liberals were not allowed to control basically how it goes. And it was an actual federal court. And this federal court actually ruled that the use of the Emergencies Act was unjustified. It was unnecessary and an abuse of power. So the Liberals are going to appeal this to the Supreme Court. Now, if Canada was a real country or a serious country, this would be enough to make Justin Trudeau resign. He would have to fall on his sword here. He's like, listen, one of the things for prime ministers of countries is they're kind of immune from going to jail for, national interest reasons. Okay, when you become prime minister, president, or something, you get certain prestige and privileges that we have to accept. You have to kind of say, I will be prime minister, I'll do my duty. And you get your book deals, okay? And you get the speaking tours. And it's fine that former prime ministers make millions of dollars after they do it. And they get it. But you need to wear a suit and go around and be very fancy because your success kind of ups the general prestige of the country. And if you mess around or found to be doing stuff, the general handshake agreement is you resign, you take the blame upon yourself, right? You do the honorable thing, you step down, you go away for a couple years, and then you can do your book deals and all that afterwards. You can sort of run around the world doing your thing. But this is sort of a total violation of the deal where you have Justin Trudeau outright breaking the laws and flouting, the democratic process and all the institutional checks and balances. And he's just sort of rubbing it in your face and taking no responsibility and gaslighting and sort of declaring himself king, where it's driving a lot of people crazy because, he froze people's bank accounts that had no criminal history without a court order. Just unilaterally took people's money and froze it. We have a massive money laundering problem in Canada from the IRGC, Hezbollah, the CCP. And as someone who lives in Toronto and has done some investigation, we all I can take you to north of Toronto and there's a bunch of money change shops. I can be like, okay, that's the money laundering front of the IGC. That one from launders for the CCP. And like, we all know this, like, okay, this is criminals are there. This is a criminal enterprise. This is a criminal enterprise. And like millions of dollars flow through there, and there. We're just letting this happen. And we've shown that we can just freeze people's bank accounts, but we're not going after the mafia, the CCP, the IRGC, whatever nonsense from Pakistan funds the Khalistanis here. That's all fine. Right? It was some woman in Halifax who gave $50 to the truckers. She got her bank account frozen. This is a disgrace. And it's a massive abuse of power to unilaterally freeze people's bank accounts without a court order. It's insane. That's the level that even the Islamic Republic of Iran won't go to. These most despotic countries know, okay, the way we get foreign investment is like people need to feel that their money is safe in our country. So it's one thing to torture and imprison someone because he sneezed at a party and you're a dictator and you don't like him. It's a whole other thing to take their money and assets, because then that scares all the other businesses, right? So it is a weird thing where like it's more socially acceptable for a dictator to like torture someone to death than murder him than it is to freeze their bank accounts. Weird world, but we kind of understand why that is the way it is. Justin Trudeau went 0 to 100, just freezing random. Canada's no longer a safe country for your bank and money thing. Like, we could take your assets anytime we want if you disagree with the government, and we could just invoke emergency powers. And that's scary because Canada's still under an emergency. We have a climate emergency, right? There was, there were 7 when the Emergencies Act was instituted in Canada. That was our 7th official emergency, right? We were under again the climate emergency because still an emergency somehow. Then there was a municipal COVID emergency. We had emergency powers for COVID in every municipal city. Then there was a provincial COVID emergency, which gave them the ability to invoke emergency powers for COVID. Then there was a federal COVID emergency. So there's 4 emergencies. And then the Freedom Convoy came. And then there was another municipal emergency because people are honking. And then there was a provincial emergency where Doug Ford wanted to take everyone's money and freeze their bank accounts and steal their trucks. And then there was a federal emergency. This was our 7th emergency. Simultaneously, that resulted in the police coming down and cracking skulls. And again, if you can just have a government where they can declare anything's an emergency, and under an emergency they can take your money, that's not a safe country for investment. Like, trillions of dollars flowed out of Canada from any wealthy person who was not perfectly ideologically aligned with Justin Trudeau said, oh, this isn't a safe place for my money. Why would I keep money in Canada? The only reason you keep money in Canada with high taxes and high fees is it's safe. Canada's a country where just your money is safe. If you're an American businessman or an Iranian terrorist, it's a safe place because nothing really happens. But now, Canada's not a safe place for your money if you're to the right of center. It's not under Justin Trudeau. It's perfectly safe. Again, if you're an Iranian terrorist or a communist infiltrator, like if you're using the money to fund bombing and murdering of civilians, you're fine, right? But if your money's being used to, I don't know, like make a PragerU video or like host an event where Jordan Peterson's going to talk about something, they might freeze your bank account. So, Canada's in a bad spot, and Justin Trudeau needs, for the health of his country, and he's not going to do it, but this is why he needs to fall on his sword, say, mea culpa, we're not going to freeze anyone's bank account. Justin Trudeau and Chrystia Freeland have to go. And sort of show that, oh, it was wrong to freeze people's bank accounts. There's actually consequences in Canada when people go after your money without a court order, and reestablish this equilibrium where people can feel safe that Canada is a safe haven for their assets. But that would require some humility, and fundamentally, he's a narcissist, so he's not capable of doing that.
That's it. That actually, this was a wonderful story about Canada, which is what the people know. It's not a safe country to invest. And the Canadian Prime Minister always talked about the proportionality in response that Israel did to this, and proportionality in farmers' agitation.
Yeah.
Here it was the proportionality that he showed. I did not know you had 7 emergencies, or you are still reeling under them. And that's the point which I'm trying to say. That the criminal elements.
We're down 6. We're down to just 1. We just have a climate emergency.
Okay,
right
the criminals take advantage
Yeah.
of these elements, which is what the newsroom talked about. When you begin to use political compulsions and your corporate greed to manage and manipulate news, that has created an opportunity for you and I to be in business. So thank you very much for being with us today, and very, very, very enlightening conversation. And I maintain that democracy is under severe strain in countries which are which I call the prominent democracies of the world. I rate India and United States as the two most prominent democracies. Canada, UK, they are other big democracies of their own in their own right, but abuse of power and manipulation of people in this technology era, people are no longer fools. I find leaders are committing mistakes they may not have enough time to recover from. Thank you very much, viewers, for being with us. Please like, subscribe, and support our channel. Give your feedback, that makes us better. And Daniel, thank you very much for coming. I wanted to talk to you about also the crisis of leadership in democracies. That would be next time. I always end my show by saying, Satyameva Jayate. It means, if you are not familiar with that, truth will triumph or truth must triumph. For truth to triumph, you and I and everybody has to stand up to it. Thank you
Right.
very much for joining today.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.